It was just this Christmas that went by, and things were getting busy. I had to start buying presents for the family. I had finished shopping, but I still needed to grab a present for my little cousin. She's not very hard to shop for since she is only 4 years old. She likes things like Peppa Pig or My Little Pony. She really liked, and I say liked for a reason, Max and Ruby. So when I decided to go looking for a present, I figured something like a Max and Ruby DVD would have been perfect, since she likes to watch it on a daily basis. However, Christmas meant that most of the online DVDs were sold out on most places. I went to look on eBay as well, but I figured I couldn't trust what condition these DVDs would have been in. So I was stuck in a rut for quite a while until that package arrived. I was at home still scrolling for a stupid DVD until I heard the sound of something being pushed into my letterbox. I caught a hold of it before my dog did and looked at the package. It seemed to be wrapped fairly bad, with what looked like grease marks and stains on it. Naturally, like anyone would, I decided to open the package. Inside was something that I couldn't explain. It was a Max and Ruby DVD, but I had not seen one like it online. It was like some little kid had drawn on the front of the cover with a marker that was just titled Max and Ruby, with what looked like a poorly drawn illustration of Max and Ruby on the front. There were no names or anything, but on the back of it had a list of 4 episodes, all in blunt titles. Episode 1, Episode 2, Episode 3, then Episode 4. I gave the DVD a watch over, and to my surprise, the episodes were all in perfect quality and seemed to have no flaws. It was as if it was a real DVD, just with a homemade cover. The only thing I thought was odd was the episode selection screen. The episodes had names, but they were all called Max and Ruby 1, with the numbers being changed as it went down the list. The actual selection screen was just a plain white screen with black text with the episode list and nothing else. After giving it much thought, I decided to change the cover to something a little bit nicer by printing out a DVD cover that I had found on Google and tracked down the names of the episodes so they were labeled correctly. I left the episode list screen alone because I figured it was self-explanatory. Christmas went by and things were just fine now. I gave my little cousin her DVD and she was quite happy with it all through Christmas, but that was only because she had not watched it yet. On Boxing Day, the family had gone out for a meal and left me to babysit my cousin. I was not too bothered about being left at home. I figured now was a good time to put on the DVD for her. I put the DVD in and let it play. While I was in the kitchen eating my dinner, from what I could hear, she had just watched episodes 1 to 3 so far. I was just about to finish off my noodles when I heard my cousin screaming from the other room. Dropping everything, I had ran into the living room and saw my cousin curled up on the floor screaming. I had looked up at the TV and felt my heart in my throat. What I caught a glimpse of was the most disturbing thing that I had ever seen. It was what appeared to be a frame of Max and Ruby standing next to each other in complete and utter darkness. But what made it so horrible was the lack of their faces. They had lost their noses and their mouths, and their eyes were replaced with big, darkened, hollow holes. The colors were a disgusting blood red, and there was faint static in the background. The sound was replaced with what sounded like Max and Ruby theme playing backwards, with the faint sound of static in the mix of it all even. It had to be the most disturbing thing that I had ever seen, and it must have been on the screen for at least 20 seconds before the screen went black and the TV turned off. Which alone was weird because DVDs do not usually turn off by themselves. I was able to calm my cousin down, telling her it wasn't real, and she had just had a real nightmare as she had fallen asleep in front of the DVD. However, I knew in my mind it was entirely real. My parents had rung me up and told me they were going to be out all night, so this was the best opportunity to look at this DVD more closely. I did not mention it to them, and as soon as I hung up, I grabbed the DVD and stuck it in my laptop. As soon as it loaded, I noticed that Episode 4 had now been replaced with R.I.P. Mommy and Daddy, which sent a deep chill down my spine. Since my cousin was asleep now, I plugged in my earbuds so she can sleep without having to hear anything. Normally, an episode of Max and Ruby would have 3 short stories, but this episode only had 1. It started off quite lighthearted. Max and Ruby were playing tag in the garden, and their parents were on the porch watching them play. However, something was off. The sound was playing in reverse, and the parents' faces were of that of sadness. A film grain became present which grew worse and worse every second, and it panned to the mother and father, and in a deep sorrow the father spoke. It's such a shame. He sighed. It then cut short to the sound of static and a large scream, followed by the sound of 2 people choking while the mother and father mumbled to each other in the background. But it was impossible to understand them. The sounds were so realistic, it made me almost physically sick. The screen cut to white for a split second, then the screen transitioned over to Max and Ruby standing in front of what looked like a gravestone labeled R.I.P. Mommy and Daddy. The 2 of them had no faces. At this point, there was no sound apart from the faint static. The scene remained on screen for about a minute and a half before it cutting to black. It then changed scenes again, now showing Max and Ruby sitting in his room, while undecipherable whispering became apparent and grew louder over time. Both of them were sobbing uncontrollably, while transparent clips of a murder playing in reverse flashed on the screen. The father pulled out a knife from his neck, picked up a bloody axe, and hacked away at the corpse of the mother before she came back to life, and he walked up the stairs. By this point, the whispering became louder, but more of the whispering voices started to disappear, and the very second it came down to one voice. It was a rather angry woman's voice who screamed, "Burn in hell!" I was absolutely horrified. The scene had changed to Max sitting in his room. He was standing on a chair with a noose hanging from the ceiling. He had brought it around his neck. The scene faded to black, and the static got louder. Almost instantly, it then cut to Ruby walking in on her brother. She let out a gut-twisting scream. The camera was panned on her face as the sound of the chair being kicked and the same choking before began to play. The picture of Ruby's face stayed on the screen for a good 5 minutes. This time, her eyes had returned to the same darkened, gaping holes. And as before, there were no other facial features. The static grew louder and drowned the sound of their cries. The scene cut to black with loud static. When the screen returned, Ruby was sitting now on her own in the garden by 2 gravestones. One was labeled R.I.P. Mommy and Daddy, and the other R.I.P. Brother. At this point, I had already been sick and was sitting, still shaken. The episode seemed to have come to an end at last, as the Max and Ruby theme song played slowly in reverse. I was about to eject the DVD when the same image came up like it did on the TV. This time, however, there was text above the 2 rabbits that said, "Death is our only release." It stayed on this for a few seconds before the DVD finally popped out of the laptop. I sat there trying to contemplate what had happened. In my shock and fear, I made the stupid decision to break the DVD up as much as I could before leaving the house. I shoved the pieces down the drain. Thankfully, I kept a few screenshots and saved them to the laptop. The next couple of days went past without anything unusual happening. I had a few nightmares about the DVD, but luckily that was it. My cousin had gone back home along with the rest of the family. It was a late night, and my parents had gone out for dinner, leaving me to watch TV. I heard what sounded like someone posting something through the door. At this point, The DVD had left my mind since I had not told anyone about it. However, it all came floating back when I looked down at the letter in front of me. It was just messily folded up, and it only read, "Death is our only release."